Wow, again, I have to say every week I'm saying, man, this is the best show ever of continuing conversations, as we talk about different topics that are relevant to Star Trek Adventures, to Captain's Log, to the gaming community, to the ever-growing story of Star Trek. I'm Michael Dismuke. I am the co-host here on Continuing Conversations. I'm also one of the main bloggers on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures and Captain's Log. Last year, we almost hit 90,000 unique visitors, which is totally awesome. Almost 500,000 views on the site. And of course, a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures and lead writer on Captain's Log. And I would be nothing if it was not for the estimable Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modiphius Entertainment, going on strong now. I'm heading into year 8 working with Modiphius, which is hard to believe, but it's been a long, fun trip. And I don't know how we've been doing the show for almost 2 years now, Michael.
I don't know.
And this is the first time we've actually been able to get Chris Birch on the line. So Chris is the president, CEO, chief creative officer of Modiphius Entertainment. So he's responsible for so many amazing things with Modiphius, and super excited to have you on the show, Chris. As tradition on our show, it would be great if you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then if you can, fold in what your favorite Star Trek series is and your favorite Star Trek character. I know you're a big fan, so would love to hear your responses there.
Hi, guys. It's lovely to be here finally. Obviously I'm Chris Birch, one of the founder with my lovely wife of Modiphius. And I guess Star Trek, I grew up on Captain Kirk, right? So it's got to be the original series with all the amazing stuff they did with that show. It was the fact that they had this like amazing different multicultural cast, multi-country cast at the height of the Cold War, and I think wasn't it the first interracial kiss on color television? That was pretty astounding. And who's my favorite character? I still think I think my favorite scene is the prune juice scene. But that's the Next Generation.
Yeah.
Right. With Guinan and Worf, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it Guinan or is it Worf, your favorite character?
Oh, well, Worf, of course.
Okay. Could be Guinan. We have we've had, dozens, if not nearing 100 guests on this show, and it seems like I'm surprised by the answers, and that's like very, very good. I was just watching the Corbinite Maneuver last night, the original series, which is a classic. So they're so good. Plus, they're all remastered now on Netflix with the graphics. I have a question for you, Chris, which we have to ask since this is your first time on the show too. How was it that Modiphius got the license to the Star Trek to do the RPG in the first place? People may not know that if they're new to the game.
Sure. Well, I always believe you should work on stuff you love, because it comes through when you do interviews and when you do the work. And I'd always been a huge fan of Star Trek. Star Trek I always said, I love Star Wars and Star Trek. And when I was growing up, Star Wars was like your uncle that came once a year with something cool. And Star Trek was your best buddy who lives next door, and you would hang out every week.
I like that.
Play games, right? And now we're like, we have so much of everything. We're totally spoiled. I mean, I grew up in the desert years after Return of the Jedi. And all we had was reruns of Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. So I was talking to, I got back in touch with a guy I knew who worked on the original Mutant Chronicles brand, and he was working with City of Heroes, and he was working on Star Trek Online. And I was like, oh, do you know the people at CBS? I'd love to try and get a deal with them. And he's like, okay, I know the head of licensing. Let me do an intro. Nice. And they were a small team at the time. They didn't have the time. They thought it was a great idea, but, they knew how much work was involved because, there'd been previous Star Trek role-playing games. And we even offered to hire someone to do the work at their end. And anyway, cut long story short, eventually they got the funds. I guess they knew what was coming with Star Trek. They expanded, and we got I remember getting the contract through and you're like, wow, we're going to make Star Trek. This is amazing. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty wild. I remember that first year, I think, when we met Jim at Gen Con and we'd announced it, and just so many people coming up from the industry going, oh, I've got to work on Star Trek. Please, can I work on Star Trek? And there was just so many, awesome people in the industry who clearly, they loved Star Trek. The reason they were there doing stuff maybe in role playing was because, of things like Star Trek that had expanded their minds when they were kids. So,
I have to say, I mean, from my knowledge and my observation, the level of authors, people who even author like novels for Star Trek and who come in and write for the game, is that a normal thing for an RPG company to be able to drag in that talent? That's pretty. You have Marco Raffaella, Dayton Ward, Scott Pearson, Derek Tyler Attico. You got a list of not quite a few creators, and now Dr. Aaron McDonald.
It's all down to how nice Jim is. You see, they will just work for him. I think it's interesting, right? Because Star Wars is just it's huge as a brand, and it's a completely different world in a sense. Mm-hmm. And Star Trek is much more like the community is so much more involved in Star Trek. And I just find that people in the Star Trek scene are just so lovable and kind. Well, in general, there's always a few exceptions, but in general, really nice and just want to work together and people love creating for Star Trek. I remember when I got hold of Rick Sternbach because we wanted to get his help doing the map tiles for the Next Generation and Klingons. And he was just so lovely to work with and just very open and told us all the crazy stories from his time on Next Generation. And there just does seem to be this passion to create. And also the great thing is, CBS and Paramount have been super open to us creating stuff. So they actually embrace all the partners adding to the Star Trek universe. And because obviously they have the alpha, beta canon, so you can kind of get away with it. And then if they like something, I guess they just take it in.
Yeah.
It's very, very open and passionate, and everyone involved is just super keen. And I think that's why people want to work for stuff, because they just love Star Trek and any excuse to write Star Trek.
Yeah.
So
it's true just to have a piece of that universe. Yeah. And
absolutely. I was going to say, it's really exciting to see the Star Trek, like everybody I've ever talked to involved in Star Trek, all the production people, the writers, the artists, the development people, etc. They're all super willing to get involved. And that's how we keep ending up getting all these crazy guests on our show, Michael, is because they all say yes. I was like, yeah, we'd love to work on more Star Trek, whether it's the RPG or a nonfiction book or something else. And they've all been super generous with their time and their talent and their efforts. And it's amazing, this community, like not just the Star Trek Adventures community, but like the extended Star Trek, family, such as it is. It's just been an amazing experience over the last several years to see how many people are willing to help us. If we reach out and we say, hey, we're working on the RPG. I saw this graphic in this random magazine you did. Do you have that graphic? Can I put that in my book? And they're like, oh yeah. And then here's 10 million other things. And it's like, oh wow, cornucopia of riches here, right?
Yeah. Just the partnership with Star Trek Online alone.
Oh yeah.
I mean, now it's a creative connection between the RPG and the TV shows, which is amazing. Right. So
yeah, and cool. The fans, because the fans are connected to all this as well. The fans really see the connectivity between the different licensors and the licensees. Like they see that we're working with Star Trek Online and Star Trek Timelines and everybody else. And they're like, oh, they're seeing all these interconnections, because they also know that some of the writers and creatives are also working in all these different venues as well. And so they see this huge continuum of Star Trek stuff, right? It's not just Paramount and it's not just Star Trek Adventures. It's all kind of connected, which is pretty cool.
And which brings us to our subject today, which is an interesting subject. Now, normally I never disclaimer our shows at all, but I'm going to disclaimer this one because it's a subject that's being talked about. Some people are not comfortable talking about it. Some people, when the word is mentioned, there's a visceral reaction to it because we know people have their opinions. But I'm going to ask everybody, you trust us. You've been on this continuing conversation. We talk about everything and it's all in good nature. And today we're actually going to be tackling the subject of artificial intelligence, or some people may want to call it generative AI, LLM, large language models, however you're referring to it or what you know about it. Today's going to be a pretty good education with the leading question to Chris Birch, probably being one of the most powerful ones any CEO in any owner of any kind of creative genre now can answer is, what is Modiphius' stance on writers and creators in the use of generating stories or art using generative AI?
So, well, the simple answer is we don't allow artists, writers, creators to use generative AI in their work for us, and that's in our contracts. But we are in a very gray area because AI, whether you like it or not, is in Google, is in Google Maps, is in Google Translate. I'll give you an example. Blender, which is a piece of software that you use to create 3D environments, has a generative AI tool that will texture a bunch of gray boxes to look like metal containers or wooden crates or whatever it is. And that's generative AI. But there's lots and lots of little tools. There's a tool within Photoshop when you're trying to kind of like cut out a background, and you can kind of, okay, you've got some blue here and blue here, but it's red here, and you can make it match the blue using AI. So the simple thing is, don't use an AI platform to make stuff for us, okay? But it's getting increasingly hard to check. And, there was a great example recently of I think it was a magic artist or a D&D artist getting called out by some other artists saying, you made this art with AI. And then, of course, huge furor, everyone saying, I knew it. I knew D&D were using art, or Magic was using AI art. And of course, then it, through investigation, it was proved that they were not using AI art. And so people have been very, very quick to judge. And, I think just taking a quick step back is lots of people are very scared of AI. Lots of people are very fearful, and quite rightly, it's going to have big changes. But we have to be careful that we're not so fearful that we don't confront it and learn how we can adjust and ensure that the creative people remain involved in the process, remain involved in the technology, still benefit from the creative process that we all love. None of us want our ideas to be replaced by a machine. We'd like all the boring stuff to be done by the machine.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to define, when we talk about a good use of any technology, it's as a tool, not as a replacement of a human being's value, right? So I know at my company, I help form the policy on what the appropriate use of AI is in the workplace. And one of the ways I like to define it, you have a box, and I just want people to understand what we're talking about in a work environment, if people are choosing to use it. So if you have a box, inside that box, we can put whatever we want in that box, for which our employees can then say, hey, help me with this. And it could be our policies, our rules, our job aids. That's contained in the box. That's all of our own creative genius that other employees are allowed to use from. But then what we're talking about, and what's the controversy out there, is this open AI thing, where when you have a question or a prompt, it's pulling from all this other creative work that is not ours, which is now, okay, wait a second, this is starting to get into muddy waters here. And so I like the fact, Chris, that you realize that, there's so many other programs that are already doing this out there. It's really about knowing what the tool can do and the proper and improper use of it, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know an artist who uses various AI tools to do more work and get paid more. But he is an artist who's using art. I mean, there's some interesting examples through the last years. Like in the 90s, I was part of the house music scene. And I remember when the first court case happened because someone had sampled a disco track. And there was about 4 seconds of this disco track, I think a girl's voice. And there was the first lawsuit. And that led to the legal structures around, okay, I want to put this beat from this track in my record. And now there is a legal process to do that. And this is a massively more complex version, but we kind of need something like that for art. And there's also another example is I remember when the bedroom music software came in the 90s, and I was part of a big live music studio, and that music studio ended up closing. A lot of live musicians lost their jobs, but the people who became the big music producers and DJs were the people who went home and they learned that software, and they were maybe the guitarist, but they didn't need a drummer anymore. And they didn't need a keyboard player anymore because they could do it. But generally, it was people who were already musicians in some format or an engineer who could make the most of that software. So I definitely think, artists, I think the way it's going to pan out, it will be a tool for artists. And yes, any of us three could just go off and rattle off some prompts and create some art. But an actual artist can make it really shine. But the problem is that it's drawing on people's art without their permission. And that's not fair. So there will need to be, even the Getty Institute, which is an enormous library of photographs from across the world from photographers, has now launched an AI generative platform that pays its own opted-in artists. But we don't know how much. It might be terrible. It might be like Spotify that really pays you nothing unless you're a megastar. And even then you don't really get true value. So I think, this is going to take a long time to shake out. But we have access to plenty of amazing artists.
Yeah.
In the meantime.
And there's artists and there's also writers too, right? We're including writers in that lump too. I know, again, one of our policies is, if you're stating a fact or creating something, you have to take it from a journalistic standpoint where you actually have to give attribution. And if you can't give attribution, you should not be using this information. Right. So that's one of the rules we have at our company. However, again, I've been a user of Grammarly for years, right? Maybe going on when it's first started. And that's AI. It's a generative AI where it's using information loaded into it about proper grammar and usage in order to correct stuff. And I use that actively because as a writer and with the amount of stuff I write, I can't be writer and editor. Editor is a whole different brain frame. So a lot of people were prevented from producing written work because they never felt confident and didn't have the money to pay an editor. Whereas with Grammarly, I could pump it out all day and be pretty confident. It's not perfect. Nothing is. Pretty confident that the work I submit would be high quality. So some people may not realize that that's what you're talking about. Again, you're coming up with the ideas, but you're using AI in order to get you into...
if you are using Google Translate, there are loads. I know people who've lost their jobs because for like local community translation, because people don't need it anymore, they can use Google Translate. If you look at the wider technology field, if you're using Excel at work, that's replacing a room full of people who used to sit there with bits of paper and spreadsheets and typewriters. So technology is replacing, but has that created an enormous software industry of different types of jobs. And we are in this change. Digital art didn't exist, I think, until about the mid 90s. Email wasn't a thing until, was it 96? Well, like something that people
global.
Yeah. And so we are probably going to see a step change in people's work. That you might have people who once would have churned out a lot of art and maybe become producers, and they can do any art that they like. Again, we've got to be careful because, and it is changing ever so fast. And there's what I worry about is people who don't want anyone to talk about it. Don't talk about AI because you're going to normalize it. Don't talk about AI because you make it okay. But that's a bit like sticking your head in the sand. No. If we pretend it's not going to happen, it won't happen.
Right.
But it's already happened. Like, it's already everywhere in the software and tech that you're using. There's no way getting around it. And I really worry that there will be people who will be, okay, all right, I won't talk about it. And in a couple of years, they're going to go, gosh, where's my job gone?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not saying the job's going to be taken away by some little silly piece of software, but someone else who will be better trained, who will understand how to use the new software being integrated. It will be like being a paper bookkeeper in, I don't know, the 80s. And then suddenly there's some dude turns up who's given a desktop computer and knows how to use Excel. Like, you've got to be prepared. Like musicians in the 90s had to transition and learn how to use software and not stand around in a live studio and strum their instrument as much. And thank goodness people still love live music.
Well, use the illustration online. When this conversation came up on social media at first, you came in and wisely refereed it, which I really appreciated. And you made the comparison of someone who, like, imagine if your Uber driver wanted to use a Thomas guide, as opposed to using, GPS. It's like that. These are tools that are developing, and like any tool, it can be abused, and like any tool, it can be used properly to improve lives.
Yeah, we've also got to bear in mind, this isn't true AI. This isn't Star Trek AI. This doesn't think for itself. It doesn't have an opinion. It can only answer a question. It doesn't. You can't just say, "Hey, talk to me, ChatGPT." It needs you to say, "I'd like to talk about Star Trek," or "I'd like to talk about X." It has to have a starting point, and it can only use what it's been given as information to form a conversation that's based on previous texts it's read, which is also part of the issue that it's using previous language.
And humans are needed. I want to point out, I went to an interesting conference in Atlanta last year. It's the ComNet conference. It's the communicators from around the world, and had an amazing keynote speaker. And they talked about the danger of AI drift. And for those of you who may not know what that is, if, for instance, a foreign power or a hacker decided that they were going to flood the internet with the equation 2 + 2 = 5, then if you asked AI, what is 2 + 2, because of the predominance of that equation being out there, 2 + 2 = 5, then AI could say to you, the answer is 5, because it believes and takes as fact whatever is the predominance and most common answer out there. That's AI drift. So what they're saying is, even the more information that goes into there, the more you're going to need humans to fact check it. Because who are the guardians? And these are called prompt engineers. Oftentimes, that's becoming a very popular job, growing in different companies now. So prompt engineers are needed. So again, talking about the convergence of technology, creating new jobs also is interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, well, I was just going to. It kind of follows on what you were saying, Michael. Is that there's also the infection of AI. So the more AI learns from AI created content, it rapidly degrades. It's like it's been infected with AI content. So more it needs, and they've done a study on this. AI generative platforms must have new human created content to maintain their quality, and so it doesn't matter what you think, human creativity is not going away, and there will need to be raw human creativity that goes in. It can't be, oh, I created this piece of art and painted over it a bit. It has to be completely human created artwork, completely human written content. And that is going to be both the challenge for the AI industry, but also the saving grace for us humans, is that we still get, certainly in the near future, we're still going to need to create stuff, whether we like it or not. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Jim, you were going to say.
No need to apologize. I had one comment and then one question for you both. The comment, Michael, you kind of touched on it already when you were talking about prompt engineers. I didn't realize that was a thing until just now, so thanks for sharing that. But just listening to you two, I was thinking, oh gosh, there's an interesting opportunity for people to use AI as a tool to where, like, if you were working on a project and maybe you wanted to create a new Star Trek novel in the style of the 80s Star Trek novels, the human could load their AI tool with, 50 OCR examples of novels from the 80s, right? They can scan them in because that technology exists, and then have the AI tool help collate all that stuff into a new novel, and then they would go through and edit it and clean it up and fix it. And I just thinking, you would need a prompt engineer to do that. You couldn't just tell the AI tool, oh yeah, just do this, because you got to load that content into it.
It's probably got it already in, Jim.
Yeah. Go
but
ahead.
you can ask someone to write in that style, and we still really need people to be writing in that style and writing human content. We're in this really weird place that we don't really know what's going to happen in 6 months. We don't know what OpenAI is working on. We don't know what, there's a new version of Bard coming. Supposedly OpenAI has cracked the next level of intelligence, according to the rumor mill in the AI industry. And we're also at this point where, people are losing their minds over how crazy and dangerous it is. The simple fact, though, is I cannot use AI art in my business. If I get some AI Star Trek art done for our next book, we can't copyright it. You're not legally allowed to copyright it. When we work for a licensor, whether it's Fallout, Bethesda, or Viacom, CBS, we have to give them the copyright on all the creative work we do, except for our rules. Our rules are ours. All the writing about Star Trek or Fallout, all the writing, all the artwork, the copyright has to be transferred to them, but we can't. So we cannot use AI art. So really, at the moment, AI is more beneficial to the small guys, the indie companies. Maybe they don't really care if they can't copyright the art. They just want some cool artwork for their new sci-fi RPG. They're not building a brand. They just want some nice artwork. And part of the problem is it's all very well for us big guys who've got all the money to go, no, you can't use AI. It's terrible. But for the small creators who don't actually have the money, and they're saying, well, you're holding us back. And obviously, smaller indies tend to work more closely with creators and feel for it, but also feel quite put out that they're not allowed to use this fun new technology. And I've seen a lot of creators use it. I mean, I've seen some big companies using it. I'm not going to talk about who, but there was a board game on Kickstarter recently that used AI art, didn't care. And I think it's interesting that obviously in social media, it is a bit of an echo chamber, right? We hear the same few people talking a lot.
Correct.
So it'd be interesting to know how many people in let's call it the customer base, like there's all of us, all of our friends who we listen to and talk to, who are quite concerned about AI art, but average Joe, do they really care? Do they even know what AI art is? And drive through RPG, you have to tag your product with AI content now. You have to say this includes AI art. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure that most people really care.
I want to talk about that because you're bringing up a subject of accessibility. Yeah. And let's think about social media, why social media became such a powerful platform that some very vocal, powerful people did not like. Because now media was no longer in control by the big boys, the big corporations. They knew that was a danger, a loss of power. Look what YouTube happened. YouTube made Justin Bieber so that he got around the record companies. So AI, and I want to talk about this because say, for instance, let's take, a young BIPOC person, inner city. All they have is a computer. They don't have the money to go to a big university. They want to create a book. They want to create some art for their book. They want to show, hey, I have ideas and I don't have the network, the connections, the money, the so-called higher education, but they have this drive to connect and they say, I'm just going to sit down at the computer, which we know happened during the hip hop era. For all of
Yeah.
those who love hip hop, they were sampling from our favorite disco records, just like Chris talked about. And it created a genre because creatives had control of their tools. And so this is also an accessibility issue where people can pump their ideas and get them out on the internet. Are we in support of that? I know I
Yeah.
am. I don't I want to see these ideas whether or not you have a paycheck.
Exactly. And where was all the creative community when everyone was sampling all that tracks? Because they were really cool tracks. And no one was going, excuse me, you're sampling a 70s track. I think it's really awful. And you're taking away revenue from those 70s artists.
Well, the ones who were complaining, there were complaints, but who was behind the complaining?
Well, it was the big companies.
There you go.
Money,
there
right?
You go.
So,
yes.
I mean, again, we've got to be sensitive because there's a lot of young artists, a lot of older artists who are, and I know writers who've lost work. I met some writers at Gamma this year. I know, so that's an industry trade event. I met people at Gen Con who were seriously worried about it and were actively losing work. One girl said, my company that I did some writing for said, it's okay, we're using some AI to write content now. We don't need you as much. So there are people actively losing money to this. But yes, you're right. That again, technology is good and bad. Money is good and bad. It's how you use it. So there are people who are disadvantaged who can use technology to raise themselves up. And then there are the big companies who really don't need the help.
Right.
If anything, they'll suffer. And they can't use the tech at the moment, until the copyright issues are resolved. None of us can use that tech. The only people that can benefit are young, an artist. In my heart, I would love to think that an artist who struggled for, had to work 6 days a week, hardly saw their family to pay the bills, could do the same amount of work in a couple of days and spend the rest and get the same amount of money and spend the rest of the week with their family, or actually just painting whatever they like. I really hope that this technology becomes a technology that the creators get to use to create better quality work, to get more money for their work, to create. I mean, we have an issue that, when we create a book, we'd really like all the art to be one artist would be the best solution, but that's rarely possible because you've the timeline to get the book made. You have to find kind of artists who are similar to each other. But you've seen it when you've seen RPG books that have the same artist all the way through. They're beautiful, really stunning. It's a great look. So wouldn't it be amazing if we could do 10 times the number of books, because all our creators could do that much more work and everyone could get paid more money and get more time with their family. It's a pipe dream, but it's Star Trek, right?
Yeah, and we're going to go over to that. In fact, but so everyone knows, before we end this conversation, we're going to talk about, in order for a holodeck to happen, what the evolution of AI would have to be, because that's basically what that is. We'll get to that. I want to have one question to kind of free the creatives out there who are playing solo RPG or GMs. And this is a question about, what if you're at home and you're using it for private use? Somebody had done a solo RPG post-play report on continuing mission, and they got a little guff for using. They were very vocal and very open, like, hey, I used AI to help me with this and prompt, blah 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 blah. They got a little guff, and we had to curb it and say, hey, this person's at home. You don't go into someone's house and question what they do and what tools they use for whatever purpose. This is their business. It's like, let's not get too heated here.
I think there's a lot of people trying and using ChatGPT to be a GM for them. And I think one of the big problems we have as an industry is we have a gateway, which is the games master. And it's a thankless job. You've got to buy all the stuff. You've got to spend all weekend learning the rules. I mean, multiple weekends. You literally, it is a part-time hobby to be a games master for a group. And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of energy. And especially after a long day's work, it can be painful. And if your group doesn't know someone like that, what do you do? So, okay, sure. Like, you are not, I mean, I know there are paid GMs, but it's not a career. It's not it's a small group of people. But if you don't have a GM and you can't afford to pay a pro GM to come and GM for you, then I don't see any reason not to use a tool like ChatGPT. I mean, it's clunky. You got to sit there typing, right? It's not easy. But if that means you play and then you go, hey guys, let's buy another Star Trek book because Jim just put out a cool new adventure book, and that drives more sales of content written by human beings, then I think that's a good thing. I would love to think that anyone who's struggling to play a role-playing game can find a way to play, because that means they're going to come and buy more books written by humans,
True.
But yeah, I mean, what about the people who, hey, I'm really rubbish at drawing a map. I just need a dungeon map and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think any of us can tell people how to live their life. Do they want to do drugs at home? Do they want to drink? Whatever. It's what you do in your own house is your thing. So we can't really tell people. All we can say is, look, as soon as it gets to be a thing that you would normally pay for, then this is the concern, and this is how we want to try and help people.
Correct. Good.
Interesting. So, Chris, I know we want to talk about holodecks and AI and stuff, and moving more toward the Star Trek model.
Yeah.
Before we do that, though, we touched on copyright a little bit. It came up in the conversation, and I wanted to get your perspectives on, like, with all the changes that are happening now with computers and the internet making the world smaller, and how easy it is for individual fans or creatives to just pull whatever they want off the internet into their own creations. Like, this is a huge copyright issue globally, and I know that all the different countries and all around the world, there's different laws and regulations. And where do you see AI impacting that, and how do you think that'll change the legal landscape?
I mean, I think if OpenAI were not and Midjourney were not working on a commercial model where people could opt in, or a version where I can load up all my own artwork and generate new artwork based on my artwork, or I could pay an artist to utilize their artwork. If there was not some kind of commercial version in work, I'd be amazed. I'll go and do it. There's got to be a way to pay people a fair rate as well. But it comes back to the copyright, though. You cannot copyright art made by a computer, and by an AI generative platform, and that's confirmed by the US Copyright Office. Now, if a court case happens and someone sues them and proves that it can be, then all bets are off and that will change. But right now, no self-respecting company can use AI art. I mean, the problem is we don't actually know. If an artist I respect gives me some artwork, and I can put it into a filter, and it might say this is 56% likely to be AI art. Okay, if it's 86, 90%, I'll be like, hey, did you use any platform to make this? Mm-hmm. But if they say, no, I made this with my hands, I made this digitally on my computer. I mean, I can ask for the kind of layered versions, the original sketches. And we usually see that process. We see a sketch, we see a kind of rough one. I mean, it's more suspicious if they just suddenly turn up with this amazing color image. But what are you going to do? Are you going to accuse someone like the D&D artist and ruin their career because no one reads what happened next? They all just assume that guy scammed us and did a piece of AI art. And it's very easy to accuse people, and it's not very easy to say sorry. And we all got it wrong, and especially when so many people are aware of it. So it's a very, very tricky thing at the moment. But I think, and that's why we won't touch it. We don't want to go anywhere near it. But like I said, we still have the problem that someone might say, oh, I mean, actually, we had it for Cohorts Cthulhu, this new Romans versus monsters role-playing game. There was the artist, he does kind of, that we used, he creates the characters in 3D and kind of paints over it, but it looks like a kind of more sort of 3D style of image. And someone's like, "Oh, that looks like AI art." It's like, actually, we've been working on this for about 4 years, and this was made about 3 years ago. So I know, this is before the AI platform, so I know there's no AI art in it.
Right.
But you could have imagined someone with a bit more. And that artist now works for he does Venom covers, Star Wars covers. You can imagine someone maybe with a bit more reach calling them out, and then suddenly everyone's like, "Oh, because I saw someone say it, it must be AI art." And you've got to be ever so careful, because people's careers ride on this, and it is going to be harder for us to check. Like, it used to be quite easy because you could see that AI doesn't draw hands very well, and there'd be all kinds of weird things. And this artwork that the D&D artist did had some weird little artifacts when you looked in closely, but it's just the way he paints.
Interesting. It's kind of nice that even computers have trouble drawing hands. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But it's getting increasingly harder. I mean, I saw someone had done a board game where it actually said the name of the board game on the box, and it got it right. And the logo of the company was right. That was wild, right? So it's changing and getting more capable all the time. So it's very hard, and there is no like checker that is 100% correct. I've tried a few, and they still get it wrong. I mean, I put stuff in that was really old, and it came out 96% AI. So you can't rely on that. You're going to have to trust the artist. But I mean, we know already there's plenty of cases of artists getting, winning photography competition. They're going, "Ha ha, actually it was all AI." And they did it to prove that no one actually knows how to check, especially in photography. So we can all say that we don't want to use AR. And of course, if you get found out, you won't get to work for us again, because, if you scam us like that. So we're very strict with artists, and we hope that they take that seriously. But it is quite hard to check. And, you can't spend a day checking every single piece of art that comes in. You'll never get any work done. So there's a certain amount of trust involved in the business. Like anyone who works in a company, you trust that your employees are doing it, actually working through the day, don't you? So, that's the challenge we all face.
Good. Jim, did you get your question answered?
No, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that covered it pretty well. I think we were focusing more on art than on writing, because, writing is just as big of a copyright issue as artwork, and I can see where somebody could use like a Chat GPT to load it up with content and then tell it to like auto generate a mission brief pack or something, just pulling from whatever they've dropped into it and then trying to pass it off as a new manuscript. And I mean, as an editor, I'd like to think I might read through it and catch enough weirdness that if the computer, didn't do a great job of writing it, I could catch it, especially stylistically. Like if it's not matching the style guide, then that's a piece of it too. But I would probably need a tool to run it through to say, does this look accurate? And then it goes to trust, like what you were saying, Chris. Like I would, if this becomes a bigger issue, I would probably be inclined to lean more into the writers who I know are reliable and I know are delivering original content, as opposed to somebody new coming in saying, "Hey, I can write this manuscript for you in a couple days," and then hands in something that I'm like, "Well, okay, hold on. How did you make this? I mean, are you just writing fast, or is this did you have some help?" Right.
Well, I mean, I think even OpenAI, one of their other projects, is a tool to spot AI. And they're the best people to write the software to check for it as well. So they can help us out both ways.
Well, that's brilliant if you think about it, because not only are they getting a lot of free press with the controversy of OpenAI, they have people using it right now, but then they're going to also monetize the Guardian for AI. I mean, it's brilliant if you think about it. I'm waiting for them to go public.
Yeah, I know. I can imagine. Yeah.
They're going to be the Netflix.
Like crypto. Yeah, it's like crypto, though, was, a few years ago, that it's like, this is the thing that's going to make you so much money. And like AI is that, I mean, it's like multimedia in the 90s. Everyone was like, multimedia is going to change the world. We're all going to be sitting there in the cinema and clicking A or B, deciding which way we want the movie to go. And it's like, yeah, no, we're not.
Yeah, exactly. That is crazy. Yeah.
AI is a different beast. It is, because it's already in our tech. It's already having a use. And obviously, when we start to think about Star Trek, we've got to remember Star Trek, yes, uses AI, but it went through a horrible time to get there. They had their war with the machines.
Well, I was just finishing David Mack's book Control, the first in the series about Section 31 and control and its origins as an artificial intelligence from the 2100s. And it's scary actually how David Mack wrote that, by the way, great writer for Star Trek novelists. And he wrote this before the AIs, the current open generative AI conversation. But again, that's why Star Trek hits the mark, because it's so parallel to the conversations, the conversations the characters have then at the inception of Starfleet are almost exactly what are happening now in the media.
Yeah. That's right.
All right. So let's talk about that then a little bit. We want to give fodder to our GMs and players out there on how to take this social issue and make it great in a game. One of the things that, of course, Star Trek is known for is the holodeck, right? So in order to even get to the holodeck, and if you think about what they do, when I go back and watch the Star Trek shows now, I crack up because they're creating people who look like people. I think about Bashir's 007 program in Deep Space Nine, where he not only takes the likeness of his coworkers, but he even puts some of them in some HR compromising positions.
Yeah. I mean, because it's a bit, there's this idea about kind of regenerating loved ones, as a voice on a phone or as a social media presence, so you could engage with loved ones because it can read all their social media profile, all their videos, and regurgitate their voice. And so I imagine that's just really straightforward for the holodeck is like, hey, who do you want to be in the program? Can you use Dave, Julie, and Erica from operations, please? I'd like to I want them to be in my story because they're really cool and awesome, and they never have time to come and play with me. So I think what you've got to think about is, because they're so much more in advance of us, and already we can think we have potentially the ability to replicate people, certainly in a digital, like a voice or like a text format. Obviously, not a hologram in front of you that you can touch and do stuff with, but it's
Carrie Fisher in Star Wars.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, wild. Yeah, and lots of interesting. I mean, that's obviously that's been a big part of the strike with the actors in America, is they want more controls about whether their likenesses are used, like whether something. One of the big things is, a friend of mine is a big Hollywood script writer, and he gets paid a lot of money if he writes the first draft of the script. If he rewrites the script, it's a lot less money. So a Hollywood unscrupulous producer could go to ChatGPT and go, here's the summary. I would like a 100-page script based on Star Trek about the holodeck, and then go to this friend of mine and go, hey, we have this script written. It's not that great. Can you rework it, please? And so he's just suddenly lost out on the prime creative job.
Wow.
So that's the kind of context at the moment that we're trying to create these safeguards for creatives now with the big companies, so that they don't get screwed over in the near future. So what you would think about is, when you're kind of coming up with sort of Star Trek adventures, is, so how could just quite normal AI get out of control? You can have all sorts of fun with it, because if you think about it, like, what happens if you created you liked this dude on the ship who works in operations called Dave,
right?
But then the programming got corrupted, and Dave starts appearing in other people's time in the holodeck, and it gets a bit awkward, or starts interacting with people and giving away information. So you can have all sorts of quite fun interactions with AI, I think, in the holodeck, which can create all sorts of hilarity and challenges.
Yeah. And I want people to be introspective too, because I want to go 10 years back. So this is for the Star Trek viewer who maybe right now is not feeling good about OpenAI. And I would ask to be introspective. Go back, think about those episodes that you watched literally 25 years ago about the holodeck. And when you saw this happen, when you saw Bashir take Kira Nerys and put her in a sultry dress without her being aware of it, and she's part of this program, did you say, wait a second, this is ethically wrong? Or did you think in your mind, and be honest, did you think in your mind, oh, I can't wait till I can do that?
Mm-hmm.
That's a question people need to ask themselves.
Yeah. Probably ethically wrong that you shouldn't have someone in that position. But I think the premise that, if you take the sexuality away from it, and it's just like, I can have an argument with someone that I don't like, or chat someone up and get experience chatting them up, so that when I actually come to chat them up, I know what I'm saying.
LaForge and Brahms, Brahms,
yeah. So it's, I think the thing is, because we didn't really know what AI was, we all had this sort of the Terminator AI, right? That was our AI is going to take over the world, but we didn't really know what AI was and how it could affect us. It didn't feel like a threat, but now we can see the minutiae of how it can affect us. Like today, it can take my job away. Today, it can make it hard for me to work. Now we care. So it's...
I'm sorry, you bring up a good point, though. Let's go back from the LaForge story when he recreated Laura Brahms so that they could work on the engineering issue. What's interesting about that, in the second follow-up episode, she was upset about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she never said anything about you broke licensing rights or you broke a federation law. So it's interesting that they were already toying with the idea back then.
But clearly it's not wrong. Now, it might have been emotionally upsetting, but of course, they've not really thought that out within the Star Trek brand universe. Like, would it be wrong to do that? It might be emotionally wrong between friends, but it's clearly not a law that you don't do, because you wouldn't be able to do it in the software. Otherwise, the program would be like, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to create a real person from the ship. So that's an interesting challenge. There is clearly they've allowed it, but then maybe people are generally more mature in the future and wouldn't do stuff like that. But of course, people are human.
Right. I think there's a tricky place there, right? Because I know there was a couple episodes with Barclay, right, where he had his own holodeck fantasies, and they actually presented in the show that it was like psychologically healthy for him to work out his fantasies in a safe space, right? And the counselor was trying to help him with that. But then once she saw what he was doing, it was like, whoa, wait a minute, this is going a little further than expected. So it's like it gets into that tricky area, like Chris, you were saying earlier, what people do in their own homes, that's their business. But if it gets out into the public, then you're like, well, now wait a minute, what are you doing here? I can see pros and cons both ways.
That was covered in the episode where the doctor had created a very popular program about the Voyager crew, but remember they were shed in a bad light.
Yeah.
And there was a whole issue about that with the doctor's creation.
Yes. Yeah.
So I do see ethical issues, cropping up, and certainly interpersonal issues, right? Like if you're using the likenesses of your crewmates or your senior officers or something. And there was that one episode, Barclay had Riker in his program as one of the Three Musketeers, but he was short and little, right? So it was like he diminished Riker because he was intimidated by him in real life. And if you're doing that just as your own personal fantasy, sure, go for it. But then if the person finds out, then that could create some awkward conversations. And even in the 24th century, you would hope that they're more enlightened, but it's still people, right? It's still people reacting and dealing with it.
Yeah.
That would actually be a very fun module to play, like in the 2100s or the 2200s, where you could bureaucratically be like, what are the ethics and rules around holodecks as they're developed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting module.
Yeah. I know we've played with this a little bit in a couple of the standalones and some of the mission briefs and stuff, but there's just so much you could do with AI / holodeck technology that we've already seen on the show. And then if you just extrapolate it a little further, right? Like what if a crew were to come upon a civilization that's been around for thousands of years, and it turns out that they're all AI, and they're just like the memory of a civilization that's been gone, but they get caught up in it and they don't realize it until they're well into the story. And then there's like ethical issues or something else going on. You're like, oh, wait a minute, these aren't even real people. Or are they real people? Right.
That was the end of is it the Spielberg film about the little boy who's a robot? And in the end, the Earth is frozen over and the aliens kind of bring him back as a memory.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think some interesting ideas there about how an AI could be used to extend the life of a civilization that can't keep going or keeps its memory alive. Maybe the AI keeps the people walking around as memories because it misses them,
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing?
There's a great Mallory Cooper, a writer. She wrote the Eon 14 series, awesome series of books. The AIs in it are incredibly sophisticated, and they also had a big war between humans and various AIs on both sides, because of course humans were horrible to them. But ultimately, the AIs are just helping run civilization. But they've realized they need to be a bit rubbish because otherwise they do everything for us, and we just lose the will to live. So they purposefully are a bit rubbish and don't do everything correctly, so that we have to do stuff.
I love that.
So I have a positive, I'm always glass half full kind of guy. So I have this view that kind of AIs, I don't think we'll have the Terminator AI. I think we'll have AIs that will feel a bit sad for us because we're a bit stupid. And will try and help us. It's like the kind of the dad's like, come on, you can do the homework yourself. You know the answer to this, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, what better IP for Modiphius to have than Star Trek to be able to actually explore this subject in a safe environment, right?
Well, also, I mean, we've got to remember that the heritage of Star Trek is this safe space in the future to explore these really difficult issues. A black woman with a bunch of other people who's supposedly really good at what she does, a Russian and a Chinese in the same room. This was the height of the Cold War, when people were getting locked up in America for thinking the wrong thing, and being a little bit of, having some communist interests. This was, the fact that Star Trek has always been about, diversity and about having difficult conversations in this kind of safe futuristic space. So I think it's the perfect opportunity for us to kind of see where could AI take us in a really positive light, and the fun we can have with it. I mean, I think the world will change, and I think there'll be people will have to figure out new jobs. That's always the way of technology. But again, I believe if we get involved now and take control of the way AI is affecting us, we can ensure that it's a really positive way that it affects us, and that we, people whose lives are affected by AI have a much better day. I mean, I posted this actually about 3-4 years ago, and I said, imagine Siri, if you've got an iPhone, you know who Siri is, right? Siri wakes you up at 7 with the perfect coffee from your automated coffee machine, exactly how you like it. Your Uber is collecting you in about 15 minutes, which is exactly the amount of time you need to have your shower and get ready. It's green lights all the way to the office, because the AI plans every car's route to get you to the office with green lights all the way. You arrive, you have an amazing night's sleep, you had a great journey to work. Everyone else is in a really great mood as well, because they already had an amazing morning. And then that night, Siri's booked you dinner next to someone who likes Star Trek as well, likes football, loves this, and you both love the same restaurant, you both love this amazing Chinese food, and you're sitting next to each other, and you're the perfect match for each other, and you have an amazing life. That's how I imagine AI. And people go, oh, why would you want it to do all of that? It's like, well, you let Google Maps take you somewhere and you trust it, right? So if work was amazing, everyone was in an amazing mood, and you never had an argument with people because everyone was having such a perfect life, you probably would. And it's an interesting way to think about how AI might transform the way we live and work, and just take all those little stressful. It's like, when we were reading map books, we'd always get it wrong. We'd turn up and, oh no, there's a traffic jam and they've put roadworks here. And I mean, I grew up with, we called it the A to Z book in England. And so I grew up learning how to drive around London. And but of course you'd always bump into traffic, and now we just trust Waze, in town, or I use Waze to get through town. It will take me through little weird housing estates and through car parks to cut through traffic. It's insane, but that's an AI showing me how to beat the traffic.
It's true. It's so true.
So it's really interesting, I think, how we can play out. And I'd like to think that everyone will benefit from that, and that we won't see a lot of people struggle with it.
And I'm going to ask people who play Star Trek Adventures to create a safe space where this can be discussed. Go futuristic, kind of like Chris just went into the half glass full, and say, in order for us to have gotten to the holodeck or to this better future, what would have had to happen to get us there? That open, safe space discussion may actually disarm some people who are maybe hostile against talking about it or fearful about talking about it. RPG can be a place to bring up subjects like this, where people walk away like, oh, you're talking about AI. Oh, you're talking about what's going on right now. And I've seen that happen in my game. I strategically put stuff in there, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, you're talking about American exceptionalism. Oh, you're talking about this, and it's I love Star Trek Adventures for being that kind of format.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing, no one really was worried about AI because it was a thing in the future, right? It was someone else's problem until we got Midjourney. And then when Midjourney was like good enough to go, wait a minute, someone's using Midjourney and they're losing work, and other people are losing work, now it affects us. So we've just got to get through this phase of figuring out how to make it legal, how to make it ethical, how to make sure people get paid. How do those artists who might be losing work transition to be able to use some kind of tool that will come out of all of this to get paid for less work in an ideal world, right? Or at least to get paid and still be creative. Still be creative is a really key thing. None of us want to be sitting there writing, and be careful that prompts is a creative work. If you are a prompt engineer, that is a creative job. You have to be actually quite creative to think about it. Although I've seen ChatGPT write prompts. But only because you said, I would like you to write a prompt that utilizes the following styles and art and imagery and lighting and colors and things like that. So I'd like to think that that we can figure out a route to protect everyone, and we want to make sure people keep creating. That is the big key here, that they don't just press buttons. But I remind my wife is she works in finance here, and I often talk to a lot of people, and they're like, oh, I'm in the city, I'm not very creative. And of course you're creative. Like, it doesn't matter what you do, you are creative. You are, I don't mean dodgy accounting when you're creative with the accounting, but it takes creativity to be clever with how you do your job. Doesn't matter what you do. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this first and that later. People are creative in how they make their job easier for themselves or do a better job. Doesn't matter what you do. And I always tell people, like, don't say that you're not creative. Everyone's creative.
Yeah. We had that conversation, didn't we, Michael, a few times when Captain's Log came out, and we heard a lot of fans saying, oh, I've never been creative. I don't know how to put a story together or anything, but now they've got a tool set and they can figure it out. And I remember us talking to a lot of people online, just in chat and stuff, like, you are creative. You have it within you to do it. You just might need a little nudge or something, or just the right tools. And then to what Chris was saying, where some jobs may be lost because of AI, some new jobs may be created. And if you're willing to be, keep learning and keep being curious, you could probably find a new way to get a new job to do something different with AI. You'll still be creative. You'll just be doing something different.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I had to relocate.
Okay. Yeah, I love that, because if you think about it, rolling the dice on a random table is prompt engineering in its most basic form.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, it
Chris,
is. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We've just got to be, you've got to be sensitive. There are, and none of us are right in any of this argument. That there are people who are truly scared about the impact of AI, and there are people who are truly angry about it. And it's why we have to be quite sensitive when we start a discussion, because emotions are very high, and it can draw people in, and we can all end up having silly arguments.
Yeah,
I in the bar, we'd be fine,
Yeah, I ask people join the discussion if in a calm environment. Not don't go on social media groups to have this discussion. If you're going to have this discussion, have the discussion with people who, one, need to know, how is this affecting you in a negative way, how is this affecting you in a positive way, and then likewise, in order for you to feel good about it, what would it need to do? What would this tool have to do for you? That's the discussion that's helpful. But I've seen so many, and I thank you again, Chris, for shutting down when it started to get vitriolic online. I know that our moderators on the Star Trek Adventures Facebook page and some others are very making sure keep it a positive environment. But I've seen other social media where I shut it, because I don't follow too much social media, where I shut it down real quick because it's so negative, and so I don't want to hear it. They're not interested in you helping solve the problem. They've made their decision already and they're done with it. And we see how that works in this country, right? When people think like that. So we encourage people who are part of the Star Trek community, join the conversation. Tell us how we're going to get it to the holodeck phase. Join it. Let's imagine together and see what wonderful things can come out of that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's go one more go around about the subject. Jim, take us into your some final words about AI or any other questions you have for Chris.
I think I'll just echo what Chris was saying at the very top of the show. Is just don't be scared of it. It's technology is already here. It's been here for a long time, and we just need to figure out how to adapt and use it for good, as opposed to just flying off the handle and going crazy about it. Just be intentional and be informed, but then also be intentional about what you want to do with it.
So, are you saying resistance is futile?
Yeah, because like technology is not going to stop improving and changing and getting smaller and changing the world. I think we just need to be adaptable and keep going with it. Yes, resistance is futile.
Hey, Chris, some final words on the subject that you want people to walk away with?
Yeah, I think it's we often sit around and imagine sci-fi worlds, and wouldn't it be cool if this or that, and dream up cool ideas. And so it's worthwhile just considering how might AI affect your day. Like, I talked about this idea that, Siri might just make it easy for you to get to work and easy to have a great day and change how you live. And to imagine how things like ChatGPT and obviously the way the tools are changing is crazy, but imagine how it could be beneficial for creatives, like how it can help them generate great work and spend more time with their family, maybe. And like I said, be careful about talking about it in social media, because lots of people are, really quite frightened, and that will just cause arguments. And it's, if we were all standing around in a bar, we'd all have a great time and we'd all kind of get it, and because we're all remote and in our own little homes and it's quite isolated sometimes, it can be quite difficult to deal with. So, be sensitive about talking about it. But I would just say, don't be fearful. Kind of like, this is science fiction. This is what we do. This is what we do with Star Trek. It's what it's all about. It's about looking ahead to the future and figuring out that, and Star Trek, they went through terrible times to get to the Federation, like, the wars and everything. And I hope we don't have to go through the same. But they went through difficulty to get to that great place they're in. I'm hopeful we can get there without a lot of that. Yeah. And so really, it's be positive and keep an open mind.
Mm-hmm. Great thoughts, Michael. What are your closing thoughts?
I work in organizational development, change management for a large organization, and we know that there's two types of people whenever change comes. There's the people who jump straight into it. Three types of people. Sorry. There's people who jump straight into it and want to lead the charge and are willing to be explorers and take the risks and kind of mitigate that. We have the bystanders who have an opinion, but they're going to be quiet about it, and maybe that's like 40 to 60% of the people who are just kind of watching and kind of quietly worried. And then you have the 20% of people, whether or not they've researched it or not, they're vociferous against change because things are perfect the way it is. They're happy. It's working for them. They can't see another. And so that's all that matters to them. So I see that happening more and more, especially in the time we live in. Technology is rapidly changing so fast, whether in my lifetime it's the advent of the personal home computer, the fax machine, internet, every time it's the same discussion about how this technology is going to happen. I know I'm part of the top 20% because I want to get off this mud ball called Earth and get into space myself. And I know it's going to take a lot of pain to do that. So I think we need to be conscious. People need to self-identify which of that group they are, and do whatever they need to do to be empathetic for the other groups out there. And so that we can all move together, into the future. That's my big pontifical statement.
Nice. Very nice. You want to kick us off with some gratitude then, Michael?
Yeah. I had an opportunity at Gen Con last year to say thank you, Chris. But I have kind of a double thank you here. One is the legwork it took to get the license for Star Trek Adventures has been life-changing. You're the first person, because of getting this license, got me off of playing Marvel games for like 30 years, RPGs, to actually try and devote myself to a whole nother genre of RPGs. So congratulations on that. Some of my Marvel players aren't too happy about it, but I'm slowly converting them over to Star Trek Adventures. So thank you for the footwork for that, because that's a big deal. That this was industry changing, as we can see by the quality of product coming out and the support of the community. Such a positive place to be. So thank you, Chris, for that. And of course, thank you for making hiring decisions with Jim Johnson, who's always opening the gates for new and creative and diverse and inclusionary thoughts to come into the game, which is Star Trek. So that's my thank you and gratitude. Chris, what about you?
Well, I'm going to thank Jack Emmert, who was I think he was the CEO of the company behind Star Trek Online and City of Heroes and others. And he was the dude that connected us with Veronica at CBS at the time and helped us get in the door and get taken seriously. So he was the guy that was instrumental in us doing Star Trek now. So and otherwise it's good old Jim Kirk, right, who inspired me as a kid.
Nice. All right, and Jim Johnson, take us out.
Yeah, well, I want to thank Chris, of course, and Rita for creating Modiphius, and then going through all that work to find the Star Trek license. And I really appreciate, Chris, that you mentioned at the top of the show how like you, I grew up in the dark ages of Star Wars, like into '87 when there was just nothing. There were no novels. It was just the 3 movies, and it was like, oh man, what is going to happen? And then this bright shining light of West End Games came out with their Star Trek RPG, or Star Wars RPG, right? And it was like, oh, this whole new world has just opened up because of RPGs. And and then over time, Last Unicorn Games and Decipher got the Star Trek licenses because FASA had it, and then they laid fallow for a while. And it's just like, it feels like RPGs always find a way to kind of fill the gap when there's a long dark period of things in IPs. And then I know when Decipher lost the license, it was like 10 to 12 years before anybody picked up the Star Trek license. And I know that, like, internally in the industry, such as it is, I know I had a lot of conversations with people who wanted to bring back a Star Trek RPG, and we just didn't know who was going to end up with the license, what was going to happen. And that was like 12 years of conversation. And then all of a sudden, Modiphius came up with it, and it's like, whole new world has just opened up again. Because I think Star Trek as a RPG and a IP really holds a unique place in the world, right? And it presents something really different than what you get from other games. And Chris, I know you've been a long time proponent of telling people, if you have a creative idea or something cool you want to do, make an RPG out of it and get it out there, right? And share it with people. And that's such a great, inspiring idea, because like the barrier to create RPGs now is so much lower than it used to be, right? Because there's so many tools available now, not so much AI specifically, but just in general, it's much easier to publish something now. You know, getting marketing and then getting fans to look into it, that's a whole different story, right? But at least publishing it and getting it out there is easier now than I think it's ever been. And you've been really on the forefront of that. I know you've talked a lot about that on different interviews and stuff. So I'm just grateful for all that, and grateful for your creativity and then your vision as well. So, and also, you know, grateful that you're on the show. Like, I can't believe it took us 100 episodes to finally get you on, but really grateful.
Never.
Yeah. Really grateful that you were willing to take some time with us today to talk.
Yeah.
Happy to come back.
Yeah, and thank you for helping us handle and take the lead on such a sensitive subject. I think people will get a lot out of it. People keep joining the discussion. That's what we're here for, continuing conversations.
And I think this is going to be a continuing conversation as well. So.
Isn't it? Good. We'll have you on as it develops more and future things. We'll have you back again for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. IDIC, everyone.
Live long and prosper, everybody. Be safe, be well. We'll talk to you all next time.